Thank you, Matt, so much. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first Lighthouse session of Advertising Week Europe. It's very wonderful to see such a full room and so many of you here. I am Kathleen. I'm the founder and the CEO of the Lighthouse company here in London and New York, an executive search firm that really advises lots of the agencies and media owners in our media industry to hire the very best talent. And lots of you are also in this room today. How wonderful. At the Lighthouse, we are fascinated by the human condition, specifically within the media leadership sector. And since our inception in 2009, we've focused to bring sort of psychology and psychotherapy into every interview, every assessment and every encounter that we undertake. It is something that makes us unique in the world of talent representation, and I hope slightly better for it. First and foremost, we're interested in discovering the truth of the person within. How else can we represent you unless we truly understand your dreams, your ambitions, your terrors, your challenges, and indeed to date, how you have encountered the world. Anyone that's been interviewed by our Lighthouse team will know that we start every meeting with, where was home and what did mum and dad do? It's a very powerful and personal springboard and avoids setting off on an overly polished leadership interview that teaches us nothing about the human soul inside. We want to hear your story. We want to know what shaped you, what's encouraged you, what's frustrated you, how you've dealt with adversity, success, siblings, stress, luck, politics, competition. How do you win and lose? How do you learn? And of course, how do you love? It is through these encounters, some 5,000 a year at the Lighthouse, that we've come to understand what it is that can make and break a leader, what it means to be resilient, to be authentic, to be happy. In 2015, Harvard and Stanford undertook a joint study into the emotional states in the modern workplace, revealed that the fear of losing our jobs was the biggest stress and anxiety trigger, and this stress increased our odds of poor health by 50%. Indeed, workplace stress was cited as being as bad for you as second-hand smoke. In fact, often the very traits of resilience and superhuman stamina that may make you a CEO can often mask the signs that something is amiss. No leader wants any signs of fatigue or unhappiness to be seized upon by their competition. So, as many of you will know from our announcement in February, as we learn more about what it takes physically and mentally to sustain your position as a CEO, we've also launched Psyched, our second business, looking into the formal bridge between boards and psychotherapy, and how as CEOs you have a duty of care to the people that work with and for you. How can you be the best you can be, to be more, to be extraordinary, and to be the masters of your own minds? And this is what leads us to the Lighthouse theme for Advertising Week this year, the comeback. If we specialise in identifying leadership talent, what happens when adversity strikes? Markets shift, technology makes your business extinct, ownerships change, deaths, births, marriages take their toll, illnesses, breakdowns, burnouts, VCs and private equity pulling the plug. And if and when this happens, there can be a very public, never mind a very private breakdown. Sadly, some people never quite manage or indeed want to rejoin that race after such a trauma, whether they feel culpable or not. But for others, they decide they're not done with their story. They have more to do, more to achieve, more to say. They are driven on, they are focused, determined, learned. They've taken stock of what happened and got over the rage and denial, figured out their narrative and ultimately addressed what the underlying factors were in play and gathered some resolve. And now they're ready for a comeback. Andre Agassi, Elton John, Steve Jobs, Old Spice, Rebecca Brooks, ITV, Joe Malone, Lego, Take That, and dare I say, Mr. Donald Trump. Even the milk tray man has made a comeback. And when it happens, it's a truly heroic mission. Magical for those who achieve it and a phenomenon for those of us who watch in awe. And this week we have two very special individuals who are going to talk intimately about that journey. David Hay tomorrow at 3 p.m. on the ITV stage will talk to me about the mental and physical demands of a comeback, and one for him that has a sell-by date. At 35, with a desire to once again become the heavyweight champion of the world, he's against the clock, his own body clock. But today, we have an extraordinary human being with us who never fails to touch my heart. Not only has he come back from a challenging upbringing, one that you may fully only comprehend after meeting him today, but he's come back from professional injury, personal tragedy, and he's shown the world how to single parent two sons away from the spotlight and to thrive as an ever popular presenter and now as a qualified professional coach. Jeff will no doubt be a familiar face to many of you, having been on our TV screens for 15 years, but underneath the positive showbiz part of his life, there lies a man with incredible strength and character. I asked Jeff a few weeks ago what is the epitome of a comeback for him, and he said, It's one thing altogether to recover a situation that you create yourself. It's altogether another thing to recover from a situation that developed around you, one that you were powerless to influence. The biggest comeback anyone can ever embark on is one that requires us to create a new reality, one we later entitle normal. One could argue this man has made more than one comeback in his tender 36 years. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jeff Brazier.
It's a hell of an introduction, to be honest.
We could just go.
Yeah.
You would have noticed there's some postcards on your seats. Jeff has very kindly offered to donate 3 sessions to somebody who feels that they are needing his coaching skills. So if you give us the best possible reason why you deserve it, then we will pick the best at the end of the session, and the lovely Lighthouse team will be at the door to collect those. So think of your reasons now while you can. So Jeff, the early years, and we'd love to start, as we always start, which was where was home and what did mum and dad do? And the mum and dad question is quite a question for you, I know.
Well, in the beginning, it was quite a start, really. And my mum was 15 when she had me, and she unfortunately wasn't getting the support of my biological father, who I unfortunately hadn't met. And so she decided to have a go at parenthood, single parenthood, and 2 years later she decided that actually maybe it could be going better. So she then decided to have me fostered, and I spent 2 years in foster care. And I remember her picking me up, actually. It's strange how so young as I was, I still have such vivid memories of the foster parents and the day my mum was at the doorstep. And then when I went back with her, it was on the pretense that she had met a guy she was going to be marrying, my stepdad obviously. And for the sort of 5 years or 6 years that ensued after that, unfortunately it wasn't quite the plan that my mum had made, in that it was quite an abusive and violent relationship towards my mum, one that you wouldn't wish any child to grow up in. And I think that's where the need for a comeback kind of began. But there's a lot more to it, isn't there? I
know, there's always a lot more to it. You mentioned not having met your biological father, who then unfortunately died. How do you feel about that? Are you curious about who he was?
It was a bit of a challenge. My biological father was actually the skipper of the Marchioness. And I don't know whether anyone remembers, but the Marchioness and the Bow Bell, that was in 1989, and many people lost their life. My father was one of them. He was actually the guy driving it. And I was tested today, funnily enough, without you realising, but you said that the dinner tonight is at Southwark Cathedral, where it is actually where all of the victims are kind of buried. So, again, you ask yourself, right, how do I feel about it? But you can't miss what you never had, ultimately. So I kind of take that view. I think it's a shame that I didn't get to connect with 50% of who I actually am. It's incredible how much all of my family say that I remind them of him. Because it just proves so much is passed on genetically. You know, it's not necessarily all nurture. So how do I feel? I feel like I missed out on something special. I would have forgiven him in a heartbeat if it had ever turned up on my doorstep saying, "I'm your dad." But we didn't get the chance. So what can I do but get on with what I've got?
Understood. And you have a brother too, don't you, Spencer?
Yeah, Spencer. So as I explained, it was a difficult scenario for my mum. And then 7 years after I was born, probably 2 years into a relationship with my stepdad, Spencer arrived. And unfortunately, after a year or two, he was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. So it meant that if my mum wasn't trying to tread on eggshells around my stepdad, she was also raising a child with cerebral palsy and having to take him to hospital, countless trips to the physiotherapist. And yeah, she had such a lot on her plate, and I never really felt like I wanted to add to it. I just understood that there's a lot going on there, and I kind of began to realise that I had to kind of become very independent. And I think it's actually through kind of questioning people's behaviours that I understood to be self-sufficient from a very early age. You know, my mum could do without me creating, so I was a very quiet child because of the environment I was growing up in. I think I was quite withdrawn. And it wasn't actually till I was 13 and we run away and we went to a women's refuge in Great Yarmouth. Best summer I've ever had, to be honest. I understood as young as I was that it was absolutely what my mum needed. You know, before that, and not to overshare, but I'd read a suicide note that my mum had actually left on the side. I could see that someone had written on my pad, and I was very particular about my stationery. I was like, who's touched this? And I shaded it. It was a technique that I'd learnt at primary school, and I shaded it because I could see someone had written it, and unfortunately I read it and kind of got the gist. Fortunately it didn't happen, and not long after is when we actually, I remember my stepdad going to work, my auntie picked us up, there was a van waiting outside, there were very little explanations, and everything was very quickly put into bin bags, and off we went to Yarmouth. So I spent, we went to Butlins recently, the children and I, just because I wanted to kind of, they have never been, so it was very important for me to kind of show them a little bit of, we love the caravan. Butlins also very good as well, but that's where I spent probably a good 6 weeks at the Pontins in Hemsby. Again, just loving the experience, loving the freedom that my mum was about to have, if not sort of had reclaimed for herself. We got rehoused in a little village called Tiptree, and that's when, like I said, the comeback kind of started for me personally.
What happened for you at school, Jeff? What was it like at school? What were you like at school? Were you naughty? You said you were quite quiet. What naturally came for you?
I was really lucky that I knew what I was good at, and that was football. So I was lucky that I could kind of not hide behind it, but I could bury myself in it. I feel sorry for children that maybe are in that situation that don't have an outlet, don't have a way of expressing themselves, and maybe the fact that I love tackling is probably because I was taking something out on someone's legs. Unfortunately for them, but as a result, it was Jeff's doing well, isn't he? Jeff's playing for West Ham. Jeff's doing this. Jeff's winning that. Whereas without the football, it would probably be really obvious that I was actually a little boy who was very lost and was well within himself. Yeah.
Yeah, understood. Can you identify some of the coping mechanisms that you feel early life probably came up for you that were instinctive for you?
Instinctive, well, to focus on the positives, to focus on what I had and not what I didn't, to never allow the difficulties around me to define me, to tell me who I was. Although that, say if my dad sent me to my stepdad sent me to the shed to get a particular type of screwdriver, I would always come back with the wrong one, and I'd know that unless I did it within 10 seconds, there would be some criticism, and it would be fairly scary. So, it's sort of needless to say, it's probably why I'm not a handyman. I'm not going to put a shelf up. It's because that's where these things start.
Jeff, you disappoint me. I had hope.
I don't even like changing light bulbs. But I'm not going to blame my stepdad for that. That's obviously just lazy on my part.
Knowing what you know now, what advice would you have given little Jeff then?
Oh, it's such a great question. It's such a good coaching question as well. So I don't think I would have done anything differently. I think I spaced myself from the reality that was going on around me. You can imagine I buried myself in my bedroom quite a lot. I read a lot of books as a result. I knew every capital of every country in the world at one point because that was my particular favourite book at the time. It was almost like I knew how to self-preserve. I had a natural instinct for protecting myself from exposing myself from negativity. And I just kept myself safe to an extent from that was bad for me. And again, I don't know if we'd have stayed in that environment for many years longer, what effect it would have had on my education. I would have stayed withdrawn. I wouldn't have necessarily, not that I got amazing grades in GCSE, but maybe I wouldn't necessarily have done as well at football as I had done if I'd have stayed in harm's way, because anything negative ultimately is chipping away at you. Whether you're a child, whether you're an adult, it's chipping away. So, we got out probably at a good time, and I'd managed to hold the fort until then.
Got you. Tell me a bit more about football. So football's a huge passion for you. I watch you on Twitter, obviously commenting on your favourite team. Yeah. But also for you as a footballer, what was the plan? What stopped the plan? How old were you at that point?
Well, from 6, I remember my first game I scored 5 goals. I remember the first goal was dribbling it around everyone and putting it in the goal, because I'd fortunately grown up in a block of council flats that were next to a big park. So I had a ball to kick the ball backwards and forwards to, which is what kids these days are lacking maybe. For 6 years I was at West Ham, was doing incredibly well there. And when we ran away, obviously I couldn't play for West Ham anymore. So when we moved to Tiptree, there was a Leyton Orient. For those that have probably never heard of Leyton Orient, they're a lower league team in the 2nd division, an East London team, nonetheless a professional team as well. And I ended up doing an apprenticeship there, and then got a professional contract. So I ended up being loaned out to Scandinavia and to Iceland, Sweden, Finland. So I was enjoying a degree of success, but however, I got released a couple of years later, actually whilst being in Iceland. It's a bit naughty because I signed a contract with Orient, but they didn't honour it. So I found myself thinking, right, okay, get a job, play non-league. I'm probably 3 or 4 times as much as I was when I was professional anyway. So like I said, it wasn't the desired outcome, but it was nonetheless, I was going to, again, dust myself off and get on with it.
What age were you then?
I was 20.
20, okay, so going quite a way through. And had you had any plan to do anything other than play football? Was there any other desire or idea in your head?
No, it was enough for me that despite everything that I'd experienced, and again, a lot more stuff that we haven't really talked about, but that I felt that football was my absolute life. I was, this ball and I were meant to kind of be together, as it were. And the learning curve for me was obviously that you need to have a plan B, and that not everything's a given. And actually, given what you and I do, I understood that what I was lacking is not the ability, but actually the mental strength, which again you can probably apportion a lot of that to the experiences growing up. If you haven't got a rock solid belief in yourself and your ability, it's not just your ability on the pitch, but also your ability as an individual to absorb criticism, to react well under pressure. So there was a lot of vital ingredients that I didn't necessarily pick up through childhood that I probably could have done with.
Yeah, understood. And at what point did you start to feel physically safe? Because clearly that was a little bit in jeopardy growing up. So at what point did you feel physically that you were home and safe?
You'd have thought that it would have been as soon as we were rehoused, but my mum had always sort of said, look, there's every chance that Rob will turn up at the door one day, and unfortunately it happened on the one day probably in that school year that I was off ill, and there he was, so I had to let him in otherwise. He was coming in one way or another anyway, and then he systematically went through the kitchen, kicking in the cupboards and whatever else. And my mum was out with her new boyfriend at the time, because it had been sort of a year and a half probably since we'd left. So, all kinds of things are running through my mind. He's telling me, well, he's ringing up his sisters and brothers and saying, I'm not going to see you for a while, I'm probably going to go inside for what I'm doing. I don't know whether that was him kind of egging himself on or scaring me or what it was, but yeah, I think actually after that point, when what we perhaps feared might happen, did happen, it then meant that I could kind of get on with it. And that's when I felt very safe, yeah. So confidence started to grow and started to realise that girls found me attractive at the age of 13. That was good times, times that we all enjoyed.
We're going to come back to that. Shipwrecked. How old were you when Shipwrecked happened for you?
So that was 21. I was playing for Grays at the time. A lad that I was playing with, a teammate, had been on Shipwreck the year before. For those that don't know, Shipwrecks, you spend 3 months on an island out in the Pacific Ocean. And to me, given what I've told you about the childhood, you can imagine that an experience like that would just be mind-blowing. And to be chosen out of the 20-odd thousand people that apply for that show was surprising to me. It's not that I undervalued myself, but I didn't quite know my value at that point. I don't think many 21-year-olds do.
How much did you want it, Jeff?
Yeah, a huge amount. I mean,
and this competitive spirit is kind of, I can start to see a pattern here. Has that come from the football, do you think?
It would have come from the football, and as well, I think that the competitiveness comes from knowing that actually, when I'd experienced everything in childhood, I'd made probably a subconscious decision at a point that I was going to have the life that I felt I deserved. As a result of everything that had gone on around me, I could see how actually, you can be a bit of a victim in life, but that wasn't necessarily the hat that I wanted to wear, and I wanted to go and seize every opportunity that was available to me. And Shipwreck was probably one of the first examples of that, where I realised that I had the credentials to dig deep and produce the result that I wanted and get on something like that.
Now, we all watched that hungover on a Sunday morning on T4, but for you, what was the greatest memory of that experience?
Was waking up at probably 5 a.m. Everyone else in the camp was sleeping, or we'd sleep on the beach the other side. I'd go to the other side of the island where you had 2 beaches. One was they were both split by kind of a spit of rocks, if you like, and at the bottom of the rocks was a solitary tree, and this became my tree. And I would go there, watch the sun come up. It was perfect. I can't really describe it any better than that. But you'd look to your left and you've got the palm trees, tree lining the beach, and the same the other side. And there it would every day come up as it does, and you just enjoy it so much and value every single moment. more so because I guess I knew where I'd come from. I knew that that represented for me progress.
Of course, and it was. And so, I mean, your public profile obviously grew from then. Your presenting career started to take off at that point as well. Your very public relationship with Jade then emerged as well. So what were you not prepared for with some of that? Because it can really affect people coming into the public eye for the first time.
Really prepared for any of that, Kat, to be honest. There was a lot to it that I was... I don't think anyone could be prepared for at the time. Reality TV was in a position where all of a sudden someone was going to become a household name. Jade very coincidentally moved into the house that I was living in. I was renting a room off of a guy called Kevin Adams. He, as soon as she come out of the house, became a personal trainer. Next thing you know, I'd spent 3 months shouting at the TV at her, and then she's someone that I live with. It was weird, I'm not going to lie. And then, not long after, we're having a baby. And I don't quite know. Well,
how
I
old
do
were you
know
when you
exactly
had
how it
your
happened.
first son?
How old was I? 23 when Bobby come along. But I mean, it'll explain now actually very clearly why Bobby exists, because most people at that age obviously would have thought about abortion, whether it's everybody's cup of tea or not. As soon as she said I'm pregnant, I instantly thought to myself, well, what right have I got to be here enjoying life knowing that my mum told everyone in her family to get lost at the age of 15 if I'm then going to deny someone the same opportunity? And because of that, I was just, we have to do this.
Yeah, we became parents at the same time. I had my first child,
Right.
so at the same age. So Bobby Jack's born, then gorgeous Freddie comes along as well. They're beautiful children. We've got a picture to show you at the end. You're very private about your boys, I know, but we have one special picture of them to show you at the end. So both come along and through. And what's it like to be the father of 2 boys?
Incredible, because again, like for me, what I've really enjoyed, even today, right through the whole process, is that I can right so many wrongs that were not necessarily done to me, but done around me through my children. I'm not just bringing up Bobby and Freddie, but I'm kind of bringing up a bit of my own inner child as well. This is not something that obviously you talk to your mates about at the pub, but after having spoken about this kind of thing before, it's truly, what I'm doing. And to be honest, I suspect a lot of parents do it as well, is that we sometimes try and compensate for what we didn't have, and sometimes we go to the other extent. But there is a balance to be had. I love the word balance. I try and get it in everything that I do. Through Bobby and Freddie, I can give them the upbringing that I guess that I would have liked, and I can give them the bond with me that I probably would have liked with my biological father.
Absolutely. And Jade's passing obviously thrust the family into the spotlight in a very traumatic way. What was it that made you make the decision that it was right to take them out of that spotlight?
Oh, it was glaringly obvious. It was a circus. My instinctive reaction when Jade sadly passed was to take them to Australia. It was such a knee-jerk thing. I hadn't sat there and thought, right, there's a nice place in Australia I've always wanted to go. Let's go there. And it was, like I said, it was purely instinctive. I took them probably about 4 days after it had happened. And I ended up, funnily enough, because I presented the ITV2 version of The Jungle. I took them to the exact hotel that I stayed at. It's funny how you kind of retreat, if you like, back to somewhere that you feel that you know and you feel safe. And I stayed there with them for 3 weeks. It was just really to take stock. You can imagine, well, sometimes I guess it probably is hard to imagine for a guy. I'd known for 6 months that she was terminal, it was going to happen, but I didn't necessarily have a plan. I think, fortunately, because of the childhood experiences, I knew I was going to cope. And I've never had anything other than an unwavering confidence in my ability to bring these children up through the circumstances that we were in. So that's where my negatives truly turned to positives. They absolutely did, and I think that's possible in most cases for most people.
Has there ever been a point, Jeff, where you've just wanted to retreat yourself back into private life and just think sometimes this is just a bit too much, there's too many things?
In what sense? From a work point of view, or? From
work point of view, from looking after the children, from people commenting on your life, just being in the public domain, I guess.
I'd say that responsibility plays a big part. When you know that you're bringing up 2 boys on your own, you suddenly, I was responsible. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't like I just turned up at that point and said, right, go on in, I'll be a dad now. Obviously, I'd been a dad for 4 or 5 years before that. But the responsibility obviously stepped up a notch. and it meant that I had to probably sacrifice a few things. Golf being one of them. I haven't played golf for a long time. I was quite sad about. But also, slightly less jovial, the social side of thing. Obviously, I was a young lad, and socialising is a big thing, and things that we take for granted, like going out on a Saturday night frequently, it just went out the window. I'd still maintain relationships, but what have I got in common with most of my friends when I'm a dad who's bringing up 2 kids on his own and maintaining a career and everything else that he does? Mm-hmm. As a result, I never really got tired of anything. I sometimes feel a bit lonely because I haven't got their successes to share with somebody. That's something that you feel from time to time, as I expect any single parent might do. But other than that, feeling sorry for myself is not actually something that I feel like I'm capable of doing, mm-hmm. and I'm very grateful for that because it means that I'm always pushing forwards.
In saying that, though, is there any dark side behind the smiles? What happens on a bad day?
This is probably law of attraction, but I do say that I will get one bad day where I feel really low, probably once every 4 months, and it generally sticks to that. So, I'll have that day, and I actually, from a weird, sadistic point of view, quite enjoy it because it puts me in a position that most of my clients as a coach are in. And by being sort of there one day, I can utilise all of the strategies that I've put in place for them and just check that they work. And they do every time.
I'm believing you.
Gratitude, visualisation, it's for everyone, it works, it brings you out of anything, it's incredible.
We're going to come to coaching in a second. Before we do, just a little bit more on the television career. Clearly a number of reality shows that you've been involved in. My favourite probably Dancing on Ice, because that's the one I wish they'd kept going because I adore it. Which shows have you turned down that you've regretted, and which have you most enjoyed?
I've enjoyed everything. I mean, from an industry point of view, with regards to the reality shows, obviously they became quite uncool at a point, but I probably still kept doing one or two. But I've enjoyed absolutely every experience because you always learn something, or you always meet wonderful people and you have an experience, and that's what I think kind of life's all about, really, is trying to experience as much as you can by asking yourself the most underrated question you can ask, which is, what do I want? What do I want to experience? What do I want to achieve? And I ask myself that on a regular basis, so I'm always kind of aiming towards something different, a new qualification, a new holiday, a different destination, a different experience for my children. So yeah, no regrets.
No regrets
with anything, really.
What about Strictly Come Dancing? Surely that's got your name written all over it.
I don't want to do any more reality shows, actually.
Ah.
I again love the experiences, but you should only do them if you're struggling for profile or you need the money. That's the truth of it, isn't it? Although I'd love to do Big Brother, I think I'd kind of enjoy that kind of thing because as a coach I spend a lot of my time working people out, so that would be the best place to put myself for that reason, wouldn't it? But
let's hope that one day in 4 months doesn't appear though while you're live on air, hey?
No, exactly. No, shame.
Let's talk about the coaching. What made you decide to train to do life coaching, business coaching? What was the turning point?
Yeah, well, I didn't have a clue what coaching was. A lot of you will have, but for your average individual in the UK, you probably think that coaching is where someone tells you how to live your life, and of course it couldn't be anything more different to that. So when someone said to me, I'll give you a free life coaching session if you send a tweet for me, I thought open-mindedly, why not? Let's have a go. And like your average individual, I had a load of things that I wanted to achieve, but I didn't know where to start. So lots of procrastination, lots of kind of juggling things and not knowing really where to start. So months would go by and you hadn't really advanced in any one path that you wanted to. 1 hour with this woman and I had a complete plan. What I was going to do, when I was going to do it, how I was going to do it, and I was committed. And I just felt so decluttered and I had such clarity and direction, and I was intrigued. What on earth has she done to me? What had she put on me? I was more intrigued by the techniques that she must have used. It felt like such a general conversation that we'd had, but it was clearly more than that. She never did tell me, but 2 years later she said, I'm part of a coaching qualification. You can come to Cambridge and do it, and is that something that's of interest? And ever since, not doing great at school because I was going to be the next David Beckham, or David Beckham didn't exist at that point, the next whoever. I decided that was absolutely what I wanted to do. And yes, I can run it alongside bringing up 2 kids and having this job on this morning and doing whatever else I was doing. I'll squeeze it in, I'll make it happen. And do you know what? For 9 months, I did all the coursework and went to the actual training days and just felt such a sense of purpose. Like, this absolutely validates everything I've ever experienced. This is my area of expertise. This is what I'm really, really good at. And this is what I'm very, very interested in. So obviously that's a deadly combination, isn't it? So I did the training, I got the qualification with distinction, and you know, I've been coaching people ever since, probably had over 300 clients now. And you learn so much, because I'm obviously helping the individual to eke the answers out that they've inevitably got without giving them the answers or my opinion or my judgment, because that's worthless. And obviously a lot of the time I'm learning with them. So, you know, and I can sort of use a lot of that for my own sort of purposes. Sometimes I should give them a discount because they've actually maybe unblocked something for me.
Watch out, this is being filmed, Jeff. They're going to be coming after you for rebates at this stage. What do you think it's like to be coached by Jeff Brazier?
I think that a lot of people come to me. I get a lot of business through Twitter. I think the reason for that is not because I've been on telly for 5 minutes, because I've obviously earned people's trust, and I think that they trust that they can share this situation with me that they're in, and know that it's confidential. And because of how positive I am, whether it's, you know, how positive I come across in the media, or whether it's, you know, on Twitter and the kind of blogs that I write, people generally know a lot more about me as a coach than they do your average other coach. And as a result, their barriers are down. It means that they get a very effective hour, as opposed to one where they try and skirt the issue and I have to sort of chase it down. So that, I think, is to my benefit. Okay,
understood. And you've obviously got a new course you're going to start doing online, because you're concerned about you can't get to everybody, so you're going to be sort of becoming a subscription service, if you like. Tell us about this.
I get frustrated with the fact that obviously there's only so many hours in a week to coach, and I don't want coaching to be my full-time job. I'm still pursuing things in TV and radio, and there's lots of other stuff that's going on. So I love writing. I've wrote many blogs that have done very well. One of my blogs about one of my children, or something that he did in particular, was the second most read Huffington Post article last year, which I'm very proud of. And yeah, so I've wrote something that's I try to be generic to begin with, and it's to increase people's positivity, confidence, and happiness, which come as a trio. Really, you can't really get to one without going through the other two. And this is a culmination of lessons that I've learned personally through coaching, through writing. And I've tried it out on 40 or so trialists, and they've all said incredible things about it. So this was me kind of mirroring, if you like, the success of Joe Wicks, the body coach, if any of you are aware of what he's done. So his online nutrition and fitness course has just been a complete overnight success, and really it paved the way for someone like me to take my content and make it accessible to many. So that's going to be launching probably within the month. So
Great.
I can't wait, because I can write, you know, as many of these within a year as I like about any subject, and if it does help a bigger audience, then I'm all for that.
You write beautifully. I've noticed that as well. Was it unexpected about you? But I think you write very beautifully.
Thanks.
We've got time for a couple of questions before we end, but I've got some quick-fire ones to start off. So if you've got a question, get your hand ready. I think we've got time for only a couple, so we'll just do some quick-fire to start with. What's the best gift you've ever received?
The best gift I've ever received. Again,
Keep it
I
clean,
can't
Jeff.
think of anything. Yeah, it's going to have to go back to again just making positives out of what at the time might seem like a real debilitating experience, and having the insight or the good head on my shoulders, where I can actually say, well, I'm going to use this for the greater good. I'm going to use this to actually have to have a better experience of life.
Fantasy dinner guest, who would it be?
I hate these questions. It takes you 5-10 minutes to actually think. Fantasy dinner guest.
Yeah.
I'm a big Tottenham fan, so Harry Kane. I need to know all about him. I meditate, so let's have Buddha in there. Varied, and someone else. I need a young lady, don't I? You, Kitty, you're intriguing.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Your favourite tipple?
Slow gin. What a weird one. My granddad used to make his own slow gin, and I used to come home from training and help myself. And he probably noticed after it was like that. And when he got round to drinking, it was literally the last dregs. I feel very guilty about that.
What would be your dream TV role?
Dream TV. Well, actually, I've just done a quiz show format for a production company, and ITV are very close to taking it. So. That for me right now would be ideal, because it just puts me in a very different space. It kind of helps me realise the potential that I think that I've got, and it would really do a lot to progress the career. We
do Lighthouse prayers at the Lighthouse, so we'll do some Lighthouse prayers. Our team will do that for you.
In the box.
Last thing you do before you go to bed?
Well, it was until last night. Check my phone and sit there and aimlessly scroll through everybody else's problems and whisperings. And I've now said to myself that I'm not allowed to take the phone to bed. So that's me coaching myself.
Ariana Huffington would absolutely love that.
Yeah.
What's the number one trait required for anyone seeking a comeback?
Number one trait, you have to know what you're responsible for. Most people like to point a finger of blame at everybody else, and that stops you from ever being able to see what you're actually, contributing yourself. So responsibility, accountability, knowing that you have choice. Unfortunately, not enough of us look at those three aspects.
Thank you. Quick questions from the floor. We're nearly out of time. Who's got a question? This lady here.
She needs a mic.
Thank you. It's Lisa Vatty from Time Inc. I've noticed that there's real chemistry between the pair of you, and have you ever thought about going on a date?
That is out of order. That is so out of order. How would you answer that? Yeah, really out of order. That's probably why we get on so well as good friends.
Friend zoned. Any other questions? Any others?
You can't top that, right? She's going to try.
I'm going to try. Jeff, in terms of, have you ever had something that's the best piece of advice? Sorry, the best piece of advice you've ever been given that's resonated with you, either from the past, or is there someone that influenced you in your life that's had said something to you that stuck?
This is really ironic, but this is from my stepdad, and he said, "Earn respect through hard work and endeavour," and that was his thing. He was a real grafter. Whilst he, I wouldn't try and copy the way that he was in the relationship with my mum. He had a real work ethic, so I took that. Yeah.
Good for you. Last question then is, what would you like the Jeff Brazier legacy to be on our world?
That's such a big question again. Legacy, that he tried everything, that he did what he was passionate about, and he was a great dad, a great granddad, a great friend, and that he lived his life the way he wanted to.
And good for you. Jeff Brazier, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please make your way out of the theatre through the rear exit doors. We have another session.